is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and I'm talking with David Gass, who is a OSHA whistleblower and was employed by Amazon in the Central Valley and began to take up the issue of health and safety at that warehouse, and has been fighting for many years for justice and against retaliation. So welcome to Workweek, David.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So David, why don't you talk about how you got involved with health and safety and your work at Amazon?
My issues with health and safety, or OSHA, go back many years when I was a longshoreman, and I worked out on the port of Stockton. I worked for a grain elevator out there. It was the second largest in the world, and it was their largest facility. And my employer put us in a really dangerous situation. It was a union job, and I was a bin man that worked on top of the grain elevators. And I had complained to OSHA for a couple of months about the lack of safety in the form of a running tripper, which basically carries the grain on top of the belt to other areas of the house. And the maintenance crew had removed the safety fail switch and the machine guards to make it more convenient to move the tripper and move things around. And I had been calling for 2 months that they needed to put the fail safes back in place, or someone was going to get severely injured or perhaps killed. And I was worried that it was going to be me, but it was actually my friend. We had been working for nearly 3 months without a day off for more than 12 hours a day. And it was a union issue where he had seniority, so he ordered me to take the weekend off. And when I came back from my weekend, he was being pulled out of the machinery where he had gotten his leg caught in the movable tripper area. And because I'd taken the fail-safe switch out, the grain that was being poured on the belt that he was caught in, it overloaded and shut down after it mangled his leg and took off his pinky finger. So he sat there in sort of like a saw trap with the other belt bringing in grain, burying him alive. So it took them almost 3 hours to unearth him from that machinery and wheel him 100 feet down in a basket to have his leg amputated, and lots of things happen. And afterward, OSHA then shows up, and I'm mysteriously sent to the belt floor or the machine floor, where it's all dust and cobwebs because they didn't want me talking to OSHA. And I went straight up to them and let them know, that. And at the time, the boss was trying to work it out some way that my friend Joe had tried to get his leg in there to get himself hurt so he could, get paid, And there was just a loss of limb contract of around $75,000 for your leg. So Joe didn't come up well because I ran into him later at Pick and Pull. So he wasn't the rich man that he probably should have become over workplace safety issues. So that was my first run-in with OSHA, and trying to understand how it is that this organization that's supposed to prevent these kind of actions from taking place seem only to respond to it just after something like this happens.
And you tried to get them out there. What did they do when you told them there were serious health and safety dangers at this facility?
Well, at the time, because it was back in 1991, I believe, it wasn't like today where you could just, get on the internet and file a complaint via the internet and have it done right away. You had to drive to Modesto and sit down and fill out a formal complaint, which I was working on doing. And of course, my bosses immediately afterward, they retaliated against me because they wanted everyone to be quiet. I mean, the very next day, brand new painted machine guards went up around machinery that gobbled my friend up, and a brand new fail-safe switch had been installed to make it look like that's how it was, and that's not how it was for months while I was working there. In fact, I was given the job, and it was supposed to be a 9-day job where I went all the way up to becoming the railroad foreman of operations out there. So I wasn't just a flash in the pan. I was one of generations of my family that worked there. And I tried not to draw attention to myself to get myself fired, but Joe was my best friend out there at the time. And when I had tried to explain to the company what was going on, that someone was going to get hurt, I thought it was going to be me, because they should have had 4 or 5 people on the belt floor, and I was the only one doing the work of 4 or 5 people. And when I got sent out of there, they sent a man up who had never done the job before, and I had only spent maybe a week with him trying to train him. And I told him that he wasn't ready yet. And they said, well, you have to go take the weekend off. And that was my first brush with OSHA and finding out how, what their method of operation actually is, rather than what they preach. Now today, when you go look for that accident, you can't find it on the DOO. And that's a serious accident.
So you're saying the death of that worker is, you can't find that?
No, he didn't die. He didn't die. He had his pinky finger. He lost his pinky finger, and he lost his right leg, and that had to be amputated. And of course, his shoulder was ripped up from the machine trying to drag, which was a very big man. He was about 6'6". He had size 18 feet, and that got dragged under the space of 1 inch, and it created so much tension against this massive motor that it shut it off. So he was being cut up by this machine. He had the crook of his elbow in the braces underneath the rollers to try to keep from being dragged further under, and it pulled his shoulder apart and his arm, and it just gobbled his leg up. And it's true that there were certain issues they brought up after that about his shoelaces, and I said, look, Joe, you can't come up here with your shoelaces abound, just flopping about. It's dangerous. But the OSHA crew said, look, I don't care if he was trying to get his leg in there, he shouldn't have been able to. So they did go after them, but only after the fact. They did nothing to actually help prevent that, and I tried to get them to help me do that.
So then you were employed at Amazon. Why don't you talk about that story?
Okay, well, at Amazon, I was hired as a permanent employee, not from a temporary service. And it was as the company was just opening up. And
Where was this at?
In Tracy, California.
In
Tracy, at their fulfillment center. But if you can imagine this, that you have a 3-story house being built, and the moment level 1 is built, you move in. They're still building levels 2 and 3, but you're trying to live in the house. Well, 2 and 3 are still being built by contractors. This is how fast they were trying to make money. And there are, of course, a lot of problems that go on there when you're trying to build something and you have people in there. And on one particular night, the welding crew it was very cold. So they were doing heavy stick welding while they had no ventilation, no windows open, no dust suction, and the place began to fill with thick toxic smoke. And some of the people I worked with were stowers, and they were ladies, and they were pregnant, and they were coughing and gagging. And I said, come on, get out of here. Let's get out of here to fresh air. And I called this into my lead, and I said, hey, look, we're all choking on the fumes here. And he said, well, you guys stay in the area and work as long as you can take it. And I said, that's got to be some kind of sick joke, but no, we're getting out of here. So I got them out of there, and I sent the ladies to their AmCare section of their place to get care. And after that, it was sort of, well, this guy gave up his department and shut down production and started talking about how this is an OSHA violation, and I was only warning that this could get you pinched. You don't want to do this. You want to get people safe and open up these windows and, try to do the right thing. And from that moment on, I had a sticker on my back to get rid of this guy. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
And how did they get rid of you?
Well, my lead that came back later, he understood that my they had a totem pole out there that they called their totem pole of performers. I was at the top of the totem pole. I was their top performer in quality control. So they knew that my production work was too good to fire me that way. And he said, well, Keevil robots are coming soon, and I'll just replace you with one of those. And then I won't have to hear any more about this stuff you want to do to help make it safer and whittle down production so I can't move up, you know. And I said, well, you know, you do what you got to do. And even though I got the shot and, you know, the flu shot, I caught a cold and I tried to work through that cold. And then I succumbed to pneumonia for the first time in my life. So while I was on pneumonia, or while I was on bed rest and I was sick with pneumonia, I called in every day, which is what you're supposed to do. I had to go to the emergency room to get emergency treatment for my lungs because the doctor said my oxygen levels were so low that I could probably die from it. And for the first time in my life, I started using an inhaler. And I was, you know, I was like 41 at the time. And, no, 43, I think I was. And when I came back to go back to work, even though I had doctor's proof, I had everything I needed, and I filed for FMLA, they refused me. And they refused to even look at my proof of illness and what the doctor had for me and provided for me. It said, you know, just let them know that, you know, you had pneumonia and it actually progressed to bronchospasm where you were losing your air. And when I tried to get them to notice this and accept it, they refused to restore my paid time off and my unpaid time off. And then they thought, well, we got you now on attendance, even though I've had a perfect attendance record with most of my employers. And as that happened, they fired me for attendance. And I went to the EDD and they tried to block my claim and refuse it, said that I was fired for attendance. And after I went to an appeal hearing and I brought all of my evidence with me, the judge, Judge Mola, an administrative law judge, ruled that Mr. Gass was unjustly dismissed. He had pneumonia, he had the proof to provide, and Amazon refused to reimburse his PTO and his UPT. So that's what they ruled, that I was unjustly dismissed by Amazon for falling ill with pneumonia. Now, when I went to the Department of Labor or to the DLSE, they told me, first they sat on my case for about a year and they did nothing with it. And then when they looked at it, they said, well, yeah, though this was done out of retaliation, you believe, for reporting safety violations, technically you were dismissed for an illness. And that falls under the DFEH, the Department of Fair Housing and Employment. And that really sabotaged my case with them because it created such delays.
And so OSHA basically did not protect you from really being a whistleblower.
No, they did not. They never have, not once.
And who are these people at OSHA that were telling you that that they couldn't defend you or they couldn't take up your case?
Well, the main name that I would have to give is John Kaynak, Caynak. He was promoted through that whole ordeal. And after that, of course, I had to get a legal chiro. I was told my case would not be heard. And then I fell victim to a third-party glitch, a glitch in their third-party computer program called Houdini ESQ. And I learned later through other cases that said, well, if they can hide their glitches and their mistakes, they would rather just dismiss your case, even though I had attorneys that wanted to pursue that case. I just didn't want to part with the money with them. And everything that I have on my page pretty much proves me correct that the state sought to just completely throw my case in the trash to help hide their own errors. And that's not the way our tax dollars should be used.
And this has been going on for many, many years at OSHA, through the Department of Labor. Christine Baker you've had some experiences with these people at Department of Labor, Human Resources, in the Brown administration, and now in the Newsom administration. What kind of experiences have you had with these people?
When I first filed a suit, because I have a lot of experience in OSHA compliance, and I always put that on my resume. When I'm hiring on with an employer, it stands out in bold letters. So I let them know that I'm good at spotting these things. And after that happened at Amazon, I then went to work part-time for the O'Reilly Auto Parts chain, and they wanted to bring me on board to help sell to their wholesale clients lubricants and things like that, large orders of it. But at the time, they just needed me to work till they could get me into that position. So I was delivering parts and things like that. One of the first things I told them is that they had dummy cameras in their facility, and a guy came in and tried to rob the place, just shoplifting. And I was telling him, I'm sure this is not legal, so I'm going to look it up. So I did, and I found out that they bought the chain from Cragen Auto, and I could prove that they had cameras because they had an incident there with someone who tried to kill someone in the parking lot, and they were seen in the store. So when they bought the place from Cragen Auto, they simply were being frugal and unmanned their security department and left the cameras up as dummy cameras. And that way, if somebody gets hurt, you can't film anything, you can't prove it. They just hope that it would ward people off. When I told them this, and they got nervous, and they said, well, hey, we want you to stop noticing things now. And I said, look, I'm just letting you know. So they kind of developed a ruse to get me fired, and or just basically they just fired me, saying that I was rude to someone at their wholesale customer. And it's not true. It's the brother of someone I worked with that asked me to take his brother a couple of parts, and I went over there, and one of their people were very rude to me. So when I came back, they decided to get rid of us both, and because they were pals, and it was Mataga Buick at the time in Stockton. And I said, well, I'm not going to stand for this, because this is something you're retaliating against me for reporting to you what you wanted me to do, which is to tell you what your violations were to help you mitigate them and get them solved. So while we were going through this whole thing, I of course had to go fight again for my unemployment claim, and I got it. I was awarded it, and I showed them the proof of what I had. And the O'Reilly, they made a mistake. The manager took a picture of the store, the interior of the store, replete with cameras, and then posted it to Yelp. And then shortly after that, they needed to hide the fact they had the cameras. So they brought in a contractor to rip out all the cameras. And they issued a state to Christine Baker and the state saying, we've never had any cameras on our property, and we've never had them, never needed them. They're unsightly. And then I showed them the pictures that were posted to Yelp with arrows pointed to all the cameras. This is why they fired me for reporting this. And Christine Baker said, no, I'm not buying it. She never even conducted an investigation, a legitimate one. She just took their word for whatever it was and threw my case in the trash.
Christine Baker was the head of the Department of Human Resources under Brown.
Yes. And she oversaw, after there were two people, actually the same person put on both cases. Blanca Villafranco was put on the Amazon case, which she advised me that it's not their jurisdiction. I have to go to the DFEH. And then we didn't really get along, she and I, and she was immediately given that case for the O'Reilly case. And I objected to that, to the conflict of interest, because she's someone who refused to speak to me via email, text, or any other kind of form or written letter. She wanted it to be phone conversations or one-way written communications where she sent me something, and she refused to allow me to record the conversations. And she bawled me out a couple of times, saying that The reason why the United States cannot really compete evenly or fairly with China, India, and Mexico is because of all the regulation, the overregulation of OSHA, the EPA, and the very people she works for, which I was dismayed by that response. And then she also learned through the thing. She's a Christian and a Catholic, and I don't fault her for that. But she barked at me that I was a godless atheist, and that whistleblowers are also part of that over regulation process, and that I'm the reason why a lot of our jobs go overseas.
Mm.
And I thought that was unfair because I was defending her purposes. I thought,
She called you a godless atheist?
yes, she did. And I could not prove that because when I said I want to record our conversations from now, and she said, no, absolutely not. And, that's something that you have to have permission to do if you're
Mhm.
going to record someone. So later on, of course, I didn't want her having anything to do with my O'Reilly case, and I demanded her removed. And of course, Christine Baker then just decided to take the case and throw it in the trash, which is what she did.
And Christine Baker also was involved in a corruption scandal. She put her daughter into a position at the agency, was getting over $100,000 for a no work position. She covered it up, and there was an audit, and she retaliated against the investigator at the Department of Human Resources, who found that she'd been engaged in unethical conduct. And then she had to resign. And then Governor Brown, before he was left office, appointed her to be on the Fraud and Assessment Commission. And she was an employer representative for the Fraud Assessment Commission. And Gavin Newsom allowed her to take her position on that commission after she'd been involved in this corruption scandal in the Department of Human Resources.
Ironic, very ironic, because she's very corrupt. And I tried to appeal to Kounalakis, who gave me his personal email and everything, a private way to get in touch with him and file with him and get his ear on this. And I reached out to, at the time, it was Senator Kamala Harris, and she sent me a letter saying you should go seek legal remedy for this, because there's obviously a lot of proof, on the pages that I have up. And he did nothing but stonewall me, ignore me. And of course, I tried to reach out to CNN, and they were very interested in what I had to say. But because what I had to say made Bernie Sanders, a lot of Democrats whom I voted for, look bad, and they definitely abandoned me. They weren't interested in that. They wanted dirt on Republicans, not on Democrats and independents like Bernie Sanders. And I kind of felt like I was betrayed by them.
So Kamala Harris was aware of this case then.
Yes,
yes. She was the Attorney General of California, and then became senator. Right.
And of course, Becerra let me know that the Attorney General says, I'm the guy that protects the country from people like you. I protect against whistleblowers and people being sued like our governors, So that was no help, of course. I suppose part of that is I'm to blame, because I was ignorant of the way our law works, and I suppose that he was going to help me, but he wasn't. He's not there for that reason. But what you shared with me about Baker is something I didn't know about his daughter. Her daughter. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the systemic corruption of the state of California has been going on for a long time. And the fact that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, allowed a corrupt individual who was engaged in nepotism, putting her daughter in the payroll. This was state audit showed that, and then he allowed her to be on the Fraud and Assessment Commission. And this is a commission that's supposed to investigate fraud, workers' comp fraud.
And that's, again, I say it's ironic because that's ongoing. And in my most recent case with Dollar Tree Distribution Center, I was working at a place where you were required to work four levels high over a drop-off. That requires OSHA 1910 fall protection. But when I got there, I saw that no one, but myself was wearing steel toe boots. No one was wearing any of the lifelines or gear to save themselves if they should fall. And I don't work that way. I wear steel toes. I wear jeans. I don't wear shorts and spandex. But they were all encouraged to do that to make them, because it makes them move faster to throw product. So I began wearing the lifeline and the lanyard and the belts. And they said, look, we don't want you setting this kind of example, and yet one of my coworkers fell through a grade and hit something, and they wrote him up for not having it on. And I said, well, there's your catch-22 right there. I could either wear it and keep myself safe, or I could wear it and you will harangue and harass me the whole time I do it and threaten my livelihood, my job. And that's what they continued to do. And I had a supervisor just yell in my face, if you don't want to work and you want to wear all this nonsense, you can get the hell out of here. So I said, hey, I don't feel safe here in this environment. So I left, and then they came after me. And now this was actually after I filed for retaliation protection from OSHA, the DIR. I filed in September 2019, and in October 2019, I was fired for completely erroneous reasons that they can't prove and I can actually disprove. It's now been more than 3 years, and they are still working on this case. And the investigator, Steve Pines, who is a man who lives all the way in Carlsbad near San Diego, more than 300 miles away from me, when they have investigators right here in Stockton. Now, it's true, they know that from all of my cases, they learned that I'm an atheist. Now, Pines, I only mentioned that because I was called a godless atheist by one of their investigators, and now my case is being investigated by a man who is a Mormon stake president, or he was, or still is, in Carlsbad. He's a very devout Mormon. And again, I don't fault him for that. That's his choice. I defend it with my own life, because I'm a patriot that way. But I still thought it was a conflict of interest, and he chose for a year and more than 5 months straight to completely ignore me in all my attempts to try to get a case status, to get some kind of help from him. And yet this case still drags on. And I called OSHA out there, and they proved that most of the people weren't wearing steel toe boots, that they were guilty of serious and minor violations, and that my case was valid. But no decision yet.
And who's the head of OSHA in California?
In California, as far as I know, Lilia Garcia Brower is. I think that she replaced Julie Sue because she also wasn't doing a good job. So Gavin Newsom removed her and sort of moved her further down the trough to something else. But Julie Sue still works and I tried at length to get a hold of her. I never could. I like to call her offensive tackle. Mary Ramirez blocked me at every turn, wouldn't allow me to speak to her ever. And
she's the PR agent for OSHA.
I think so. Yeah, she's sort of like at the time for the DIR, for the Department of
Industrial Relations. Yeah,
Industrial Relations. Yeah. Now for OSHA, again, John Kanak was the head in Modesto, but he was promoted through all this stuff to a position in Sacramento, and he's the one that pretty much oversaw lots of this stuff. And didn't care, because the one thing that looked really bad for OSHA is that when you give them a case, you say it's a serious violation, they have so many days, like 14 days, to go respond to it. They gave O'Reilly Auto Parts more than 3 months, almost 4 months, to remove their cameras and make the store look like they never had them before they even went to look. Even though I have proof of that being a lie, and the lies they furnished to the state that say they never had cameras in that store, they didn't care about that. They still ruled against me without any proof at all.
And it sounds like you're saying that OSHA, Cal-OSHA is basically being captured by the employers. that they're really representing the employers, they're not representing the workers and whistleblowers. Is that what you feel?
Yeah, I feel that that has happened, but also these organizations like to help each other out. Say Christine Baker does something to slip up, John Kanak's going to try to help her, and vice versa. OSHA didn't go out there in the required time that they were supposed to. They violated their own rules, which I think is 6903. But they're supposed to respond. And if they had responded within that time, they would clearly have found the cameras, which is still something you could easily prove that were there. But they're not interested in that. It's easier to just wipe their backside with my name and throw it away. And that way, because they're, I suppose what Via Franco said to me, these people help put lots of people to work, like Amazon puts a lot of people to work, but they're not doing what they should be doing. They're not keeping people safe. They're exposing them to welding fumes and telling them to work in an environment while they're pregnant like that. And I'm trying to help keep them from killing people and actually reduce their risk of being sued. So I didn't understand that any more than I understand what's happening now, where I just tried to make things safer out at Dollar Tree Distribution Center. And I proved that they were trying to fire me over attendance. And if you could imagine this, I went to a potluck that was given by the company in Mickey Grove Park in Lodi. And because I was invited to this along with the rest of the company and the workers there, it was a huge event. And they had a potluck where you could draw a ticket to win 2 hours, 3 hours, you know. I won the biggest one. I won 8 hours of pay. So I won a whole day off. They tried to actually take a action against me for my attendance over that day that they signed off and said that I could take. And what they proved is that I had no attendance problems, and they rescinded their attempts in writing to try to fire me for this, and later fired me for something completely made up.
And the effort that you've had to get OSHA to work for you and other workers, the protection of workers of California, there are less than 200 OSHA inspectors in all of California for 18 million workers. We are paying our tax dollars to fund OSHA, and they get money from the federal government. It seems like the California AFL-CIO, the leadership of the California AFL-CIO, have not even made an issue of the fact that OSHA is not working for you and other workers.
No, they're not. They're not. And the way it seems to work is that someone like myself spots this going on. They don't have someone to come out and visit to make sure everything is on the up and up regularly, that they could be visited at any time. They receive a complaint from someone like myself, and then that person either succeeds or fails. And what they've always tried to get me to do is withdraw my case and go get an attorney. And I said, well, what am I paying you for? This is your job. You're supposed to be enforcing this. I only objected to being harassed into working in a unsafe environment without steel toe boots and without lifelines. If I fall down there, I can guarantee you the first thing you're going to do is ask, why didn't he have his lifeline on? Well, they've been harassing me not to wear it because it slows you down. And this is not something that they seem to want to help me with. They say, oh, well, maybe he's oversensitive now, overly sensitive over this man losing his leg. It traumatized him, and now he just picks at everything. And that's not true. I think that watching 19-year-olds work over a 4-level high drop off with no lifeline on is traumatic enough. It made me worry that how could these supervisors that are grown, they're in their 30s and 40s, watch this and not say to themselves, hey, if one of those youngsters fall, I'm going to feel responsible for that because I'm creating this environment.
And you have a website, a Facebook page. Why don't you talk about how people can get in touch with you and contact you?
Yes, one of the pages that I run for what we're talking about today is called, it's on Facebook. It's California Department of Industrial Relations Corruption, or you could just go at OSHA Shame, That's one that I run, and I run another for the DFEH too. It's also pretty much the same type of name, and I'll go back to it. And on it, there's a lot of information that shows you documentation that proves that what I'm. These aren't just claims that I make. These are things that are backed up by documentation, photographs, videos, things that prove to you. The other page is California Department of Fair Housing, Employment, and California Department of Fair Employment and Housing Corruption, and that's also at CalFraud DFEH. If you wanted to do that, to search for it that way, but they all prove that I was part of a system there where even at the DFEH, when I was trying to file complaints against the investigators, they have a complaint system on their website that is completely bunk. It won't allow you to file a complaint against them, and I proved that, and that's on the page as well. But these are all things that my tax dollars have paid them to do. I pay my taxes. They're paid by way of those tax dollars, and they have just basically denied many of my complaints, which go back even to 2003, where I was a caretaker of a duck hunting club. It was boat only access, and they loved my work. But we had two 500-gallon propane tanks that were shoved up onto the front lawn. Now, this is right next to our house. And the hunters, who are often drinking and whatever, they're out firing their guns off. I didn't want this thing to explode and take me and my girlfriend at the time, and now my wife, just out. It just obliterate us. And I was also asked to kill island otter, trap them with steel trap style jaw traps, and I don't do that. I'm an animal lover. I don't fish and I don't hunt. So they started to threaten me with this. Takes over a month just to move out there, and their last report on me was good job, great, everything, and I quit. The guy calls the friend of one of his friends, and he's an official, elected official out there, and his friend is a highway, or rather a sheriff. The sheriff was offered 3 hunting leases to come remove me from my home. They illegally arrested me. My wife has epilepsy. They stranded her on the island. They threatened my life out in the marsh. They locked me up. I demanded a trial, and I was exonerated of everything. And yet, out of retaliation for doing that, they put in a completely fictitious charge of murder on my permanent record, and didn't even tell me about that. And it's still there to this day. I've never been associated with a murder in my life. And the DOJ put that on my permanent record to, I suppose, sabotage my economic perspective, because I used to work for railroads. I'm a journeyman railroad inspector and a journeyman locomotive machinist. After that happened, my opportunities really dropped, because I didn't know I had this fictitious charge of murder on my permanent record, which says dismissed, but it still shows that I was charged with a murder charge, and I've never been associated with a murder in my life. So this happened just to get me off of the island, and which scared me all the way to Alaska. And they used that arrest out there, the fictitious arrest that I was exonerated of, to ruin my chances in Alaska, where I lost that job over that. So that's what the government will do to you if you resist. I've lost your.
I want to thank you very much for joining us. And I think your story is important. Unfortunately, it's not unique. Other workers as well have been fighting for health and safety and been retaliated against. So thanks for joining us on Work Week, and we'll get the word out about your struggle. And we need to unify with all whistleblowers and people who are fighting for health and safety and justice for all. So thanks for joining us on Work Week.
Grateful to you for your help, Steve, and keep fighting a good fight. I'm with you.